In the Old West, not every vow was spoken before God. Some were whispered to the wind. They said the canyon at Devil's Gulch could breathe, that it remembered every promise ever carved into its stone. When a poor rancher traded a wedding ring for survival, and a stranger carried secrets older than the railroad, the wind began to whisper again, and this time, it spoke a man's name. Part 1. The Stone Vow. Dust rose from the empty main street of Ashford's Spur, curling in slow, tired spirals like smoke from a dying campfire. The sign above the boarding house creaked with every gust of wind, a hollow rhythm echoing through the late afternoon heat. Inside the saloon, a man sat alone at the bar, counting his last coins one by one. The light was dim, oil lamps flickering in their brackets, painting everything in the same color of exhaustion. His name was Cole Hart, and every line on his face told the story of a man running out of options. At the far table sat Elias Boone, an old miner whose beard was more dust than gray. He was stirring a cup of coffee that hadn't been warm for hours. Boone didn't look up when he spoke. "Counting won't make the gold come back, boy. You can rub those coins raw, and they still won't multiply." Cole didn't answer right away. He looked down at the few nickels and dimes in his palm, then pushed them together as if they might somehow turn into $1. "You once told me, old man," Cole said, voice low and steady, "that the earth breathes, that if you listen close enough, you can hear it." Boone nodded without smiling. "Aye, Devil's Gulch breathes, but don't forget it bites too." That name always made men lower their voices. Devil's Gulch, a slash of red canyon 2 miles south of town. The miners called it cursed. The natives once called it sacred. But to Cole, it was simply unfinished business. Before the drought, he and his father had worked a claim near the gulch, chasing a silver vein that shimmered like frozen lightning in the rock. Then came Silas Crowley, the railroad baron, who bought up half the valley, and the rest he took. The law bent for him like a reed in the wind. Cole lost his claim, his cattle, and eventually his will to keep fighting. All he had left was the dirt under his boots and the stubborn pride that came with it. The saloon door opened with a jangle of spurs. The room went still. Crowley didn't walk, he arrived. A man who owned his shadow as much as the land it fell on. His black coat gleamed like oil. The silver tip of his cane caught every flicker of lamplight. Behind him came Sheriff Dane Pickett, tall, broad, the badge on his chest as bright as his smile was false. "Evening, gentlemen," Crowley said softly, removing his hat with unnecessary grace. His gold tooth flashed when he smiled. "Hart, have you given more thought to my offer?" Cole's jaw tightened. "I thought I told you my land's not for sale." Crowley chuckled. "Son, what you've got isn't land. It's a pile of dust clinging to a memory. Take the money. Start over somewhere civilized. They were girled not to attend you, and I done no stragged." Boone looked up from his coffee. "Crowley, the only thing civilized about you is your handwriting." The saloon laughed nervously. Crowley's smile didn't falter, but the air around him changed. He reached into his coat, pulled out a fat envelope, and set it on the counter between him and Cole. $30 now, $50 when you sign the deed transfer. The railroad's coming through, and I'd hate for you to be standing in front of it when it does." Cole stared at the envelope, then at the man holding it. "That dirt belonged to my father. It'll stay mine until someone pries it out of my dead hands." Crowley leaned close enough for Cole to smell the expensive whiskey on his breath. "Be careful what you promise, Mr. Hart. Words have a way of echoing in that canyon." He straightened, tapped his cane on the floor, and motioned for the sheriff. "Tomorrow morning, my men will be out by Devil's Gulch. If you're on that claim, Sheriff Pickett here will handle the eviction." "Eviction?" Boone muttered. "That's a fancy word for stealing." Crowley ignored him. "Gentlemen," he said, tipping his hat, "good evening." The door swung shut behind him. leaving behind the smell of cigar smoke and contempt. Cole didn't move for a long time. When he finally spoke, it was more to himself than to Boone. He's got the law, the bank, and the sheriff. What the hell do I have? In my fan, and my fan, under very were. Boone smiled faintly. You've got ears, boy. And the Gulch still breathes. Cole frowned. You're talking riddles again. Boone leaned forward, lowering his voice. There's another kind of contract older than paper, older than Crowley's railroad. It's carved in stone, not signed in ink. Cole blinked. You mean superstition? Call it what you like. Boone's eyes glimmered under the brim of his hat. Some folks call it a curse. I call it a vow. The door opened again before Cole could reply. The wind that entered was sharp and dry, carrying the scent of red dust. In its wake stood a woman cloaked in earth-colored fabric, hood drawn low. The saloon grew quiet. Even the piano player froze mid-note. She stepped forward, her boots soundless on the floorboards, and stopped beside Cole's table. Beneath the shadow of her hood, two eyes the color of riverstone studied him. I'm looking for Cole Hart, she said. Her voice was calm, steady like someone reciting a prayer they'd already memorized 100 times. Cole turned slightly, uneasy. You found him. My name is Mara Stone, she said. I came to offer a proposal. Boone exhaled through his nose, as if this moment had been waiting for years. Go on, miss. Mara drew from her cloak a narrow strip of black stone bound with rawhide. A marriage, she said. One that benefits us both. Said away and did diz one. Cole nearly laughed. I think you've got the wrong man. I don't have a nickel to my name, much less a dowry. I'm not looking for wealth, she replied evenly. I'm looking for a man who can hear the wind breathe. The saloon was so still that the lamp wicks crackled. Cole looked at Boone. The old miner gave a slight nod. Listen, and why me? Cole asked carefully. Because you were a combat engineer, she said. You understand earth, pressure, and air. You know where the wind enters and where it dies. You didn't sell your land, even when it would have been easier to survive the drought. That tells me your heart isn't ruled by greed. Cole stared at her. You've been asking about me. You never the doing to me 16 decane stand. I've been asking the wind, she said simply. It told me enough. She unwrapped the stone strip. Inside was a piece of oiled canvas, protecting a parchment covered in symbols, not letters, but circles and carved lines. Alongside it was an old English document, yellowed and cracked with age. At the bottom, a faded seal shaped like an eye within a spiral. Boone's eyes widened. That's Tsena script. Mara nodded. My ancestors. She pointed to a single line of English text near the bottom. The union of two keepers, one within, one without, shall bind the claim to both water and ore. Boone whispered. The stone marriage. I've heard of it all my life. It is be all debat of the soons, and visions to a comment. Mara continued. To hold the land, the vow must be renewed by two souls. One born of the stone within, one born of the law without. And you think I'm the second one? Cole asked. She met his eyes. The Gulch knows you. I only listened. Boone tapped the parchment. Crowley's lawyers won't see this coming. The old treaty's real, Cole. This could make your claim unbreakable. Mara folded the papers carefully. Crowley will use courts and guns. We'll use stone. But we must stand together. Once the door opens, I'll show you the breathing vein. You'll keep it safe, not for greed, but for the living. Cole looked toward the saloon window. The wind had shifted. He could feel it. The Gulch was exhaling. All right, he said at last. But tell me something first. He hesitated. They say there's a curse down there. Is that true? Her lips curved slightly, not a smile, not quite denial. There are no demons in Devil's Gulch. Only machines of stone traps that listen. My people carved them to guard what they couldn't carry away. If you walk wrong, the wind will whisper your name to the canyon. That's the curse. Boone chuckled softly. Tsena weren't sorcerers, they were engineers. And who killed them? Cole asked quietly. The woman's silence was answer enough. The lamplight caught the glint of something in her eyes, not tears, but memory hardened into purpose. Night came fast in the desert. By the time they left the saloon, the sun had burned itself into a thin red scar along the horizon. 3 silhouettes moved down the road, Boone's limping gait, Cole's broad shoulders, and Mara's cloak trailing dust like smoke. When they reached the canyon's rim, the wind rose to meet them. The Devil's Gulch yawned below, a deep wound in the earth, walls of red rock streaked with black. It looked alive, as if breathing in its sleep. Mara approached a flat slab of stone near the edge. Ancient markings spiraled across its circles, waves, and lines shaped like flowing air. She knelt, placed the black stone charm in a narrow groove, and touched her forehead to the slab. Her voice slipped into another language, soft, rhythmic, echoing like sand through a hollow reed. Boone stepped back, murmuring to Cole, "She's calling the wind. You just need to speak plain truth when it's your turn." Cole swallowed hard. He placed his rough hand on the cold stone. It was smoother than it looked, almost warm beneath the surface, as if something beneath was listening. He spoke 3 truths: his name, the land he refused to sell, and his wish not for silver, but for water, so the living could survive the drought. The wind shifted, it deepened, gained a rhythm like the slow inhale of a sleeping giant. Somewhere below, the canyon answered. Mara lifted the stone charm from the groove. "The door will open," she said softly, but only once. From the canyon wall to their left came a faint grinding sound. A seam of rock, one that had been sealed for decades, split open just enough for a man to pass. The air that escaped was cool, metallic, and sharp. Boone's eyes gleamed in the lantern light. "That's the breathing vein." Mara raised her lantern toward the gap. The flame shivered, casting golden ribbons that danced across the stone. Symbols shimmered briefly like veins of silver, catching firelight, then disappeared. Cole looked at her. "What's inside?" She met his gaze. "The truth," she said. "And its price." Boone rested a hand on Cole's shoulder. "Go on, boy. Tonight the stones favor you." Cole took a deep breath and stepped through the opening. The passage was narrow, the air heavy and damp. The walls glittered faintly with specks of silver, reflecting the lantern light in scattered fragments. The further he went, the more he could hear the rock, not noise, but vibration, a subtle hum that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. At the end of the passage, the tunnel opened into a small chamber shaped by time and precision. The floor was smooth as glass. In its center stood a short stone pedestal. Upon it rested a small iron box, sealed with a twist of black cord, and a fragment of the same dark stone Mara had carried. "This is the place of words," she whispered behind him, "where wind remembers names." Cole ran his fingers along the pedestal. The stone vibrated softly alive. 2 rings were carved into its surface, one shallow and worn smooth, the other fresh and deep. Around them, faint inscriptions curved, like ripples in water, within, without. Mara untied the rawhide cord from around her wrist. She looped it over the iron box, aligning the etched seal on the lid with the stone charm. When they touched, a soft chime rang out, not metal striking metal, but stone speaking to stone. The knot loosened. The box opened. Inside lay a weathered ledger bound in leather, a silver seal, and a folded map showing subterranean water lines branching through the valley like veins. Boone leaned forward, whispering, "Crowley fears lawyers. But this is worse. This is proof." Cole opened the ledger. The pages were cramped with names, dates, lists of land traded for sacks of grain or barrels of water. Some lines bore a crude X where signatures should have been. Next to them, witnessed under duress. On one page, the handwriting changed shaky, desperate. It described a night of fire, screams, and smoke rising from the edge of the gulch. The final line trailed off into a single plea. If any soul survives, return the water to the well. Cole looked up. Mara's face was calm, but her eyes were filled with centuries. Then the wind changed. Its tone sharpened. It no longer breathed, it warned. Boone's head snapped toward the entrance. "Someone's out there," he whispered. "The wind's blowing backwards. They've blocked the mouth of the canyon." Mara extinguished her lantern. "If it's them, they'll seal the main vent and smoke us out." Cole closed his eyes, tracing the patterns of airflow he'd felt earlier. "There's a side shaft, a protection tunnel. If they block the main one, the pressure reverses. It'll clear the chamber. It do no. In when strack toothen." Boone grinned faintly. "The engineers of the desert, eh?" The faint click of metal echoed down the tunnel. Cole recognized it instantly. "Detonators," he hissed. "They're setting explosives." He grabbed Mara's arm. "Take the ledger and the seal. I'll open the side vent. If they destroy the resonance pillar," she warned, "the place of words will fall silent." Cole pressed the box's lid shut and tucked the ledger inside his coat. "Then, we'll make the stones speak another way." Together they placed their palms on the twin rings of the pedestal, hers on within, his on without. The stone pulsed once, twice, then a low hum rolled through the chamber like thunder buried deep in the earth. Air roared through the secondary vent. Dust lifted from the floor in swirling halos. The canyon was awake. They moved quickly, following the faint echo of the wind's call until they reached a narrow slit behind a jagged ridge of stone. Cole pushed a loose slab aside just as the explosion hit the main tunnel. The shockwave shook the floor, but the reversed airflow blasted the smoke and fire back toward the canyon mouth. Through the haze, Cole glimpsed figures silhouetted against the night. Sheriff Dane Pickett with his rifle raised, and Silas Crowley beside him, the silver head of his cane gleaming like a snake. They hadn't seen the side passage. Crowley's voice carried down the gulch, mocking and smooth. "Hart, I know you're down there. Let the gulch be my witness you have nothing. Come out empty-handed, and I might just give you a ticket east." Cole leaned close to the vent, his voice calm but cutting. "If the gulch speaks tonight, Crowley, it'll speak your name." He reached for a small stone peg near the vent and twisted it free. The chamber above them trembled. A stone bell, a carved resonator deep in the rock, let out its first long, rolling tone. It wasn't a sound of metal. It was the voice of the canyon itself, deep, ancient, and unyielding. The sheriff flinched, aiming his gun at the darkness. Then the wind carried back a whisper, not from Cole, not from Mara, but from the gulch. A name, spoken like judgment. "Dane Pickett." Boone's eyes widened. Mara drew a sharp breath. Above them, Crowley's smile froze. The canyon wasn't done breathing yet. Part 2. The Breathing Vein. The echo of his name hung in the night long after the sound itself had died. Sheriff Dane Pickett stood frozen at the canyon rim, eyes darting toward Crowley as though the ground might suddenly swallow him. "Just wind," he muttered, but his voice shook. Crowley's hand tightened around his silver cane. "Wind doesn't know names." Below them, smoke thinned. Through the cracks in the rock, faint orange glows pulsed like the heart of a sleeping giant. Then silence, heavy, complete. "Go down there," Crowley ordered. Pickett hesitated. "Sir, if the tunnel's collapsed, then dig. I want proof Hart's dead." But the canyon was already answering with another breath. A low tremor rolled through the ground. Sand spilled down the cliffs like an hourglass running backward. Crowley stepped back. "Get the horses," he snapped. "We're leaving." Beneath the canyon's skin, Cole Hart and Mara Stone waited for the shaking to end. The air was thick with the smell of dust and fire. Boone coughed, brushing soot from his beard. "Well?" he wheezed. "The Gulch sure knows how to make an introduction." Cole pressed his ear to the rock wall. A faint hum answered him, steady, rhythmic. "It's alive again," he said. "The secondary shafts open. That's airflow from deep chambers. There's more down there." Mara nodded slowly. Her face glowed faintly in the lantern light, sweat tracing silver lines down her temple. "Then the vow worked. The Gulch recognizes us." Boone squinted. "Recognizes? Aye. But does it like us?" They followed the current deeper. The tunnel widened, and the floor tilted downward into what looked like a natural corridor polished by centuries of wind. Tiny crystals gleamed along the walls. The sound changed, no longer hollow but melodic, like flutes hidden in stone. Mara stopped before a wall carved with the same concentric patterns as the altar above. She traced them with trembling fingers. "This is the second gate. My ancestors built it when they realized words fade faster than wind. The prosagre, centimas were." Cole stepped closer. "A gate? Not a door," she said. "A memory." Her hand pressed into a depression at the center. Dust fell away, revealing thin slits no wider than a coin. The breeze rushed through them, and suddenly the wall sang, a clear tone, rising and falling in perfect intervals. Boone took off his hat. "By God, the rock's playing music." "It's telling directions," Mara whispered. "Each note marks a vein. When the harmony splits, the richest lode lies between the tones." Cole listened carefully. 2 notes overlapped, one high, one deep. He moved until they balanced. Beneath his boots, the ground pulsed with cooler air. "Right here," he said. "That's the breathing vein. This allow Joses of a diminutive days of the level de grosses." He knelt, brushing dust aside, until silver streaks appeared like threads of moonlight, embedded in red stone. Mara watched him, something like relief softening her face. "The land remembers honesty. That's why it answered you," Boone chuckled. "So, all we had to do was get married, and nearly blown to hell to find silver. Easy day's work." Cole smiled faintly but kept digging with his hands. Beneath the first layer of dust, a crack widened just enough for the lantern's glow to slip through. The silver vein shimmered, alive with its own faint luminescence, exhaling cool air that smelled faintly of rain. He leaned closer. "It's not ore, it's mixed with water. Underground flow." They can say that he wanted excellent stins, and de friends for the friends of world. Mara's eyes lit up. The covenant was right. Water and ore are bound together. Whoever controls the vein controls both. Boone rubbed his palms. "That means Crowley's whole railroad plan depends on this spot." Cole straightened. "Then he'll come back." By dawn, the 3 of them had reached the surface through a narrow shaft that opened behind a ridge of stone far from the main trail. The desert sky blazed copper and pink. Smoke still rose from the collapsed entrance a mile away. Cole shaded his eyes. "He'll think we're dead. That gives us time." Mara tightened the cloak around her shoulders. "Time for what?" "Proof," Cole said, "that what we found is real. Enough to make Crowley's claim useless." Boone smiled tiredly. "You mean to do this legal?" Cole nodded. "For now. You were right. Crowley fears evidence more than bullets." They rode Boone's old mule to his cabin at the edge of town. The place was barely more than 4 walls and a stovepipe, but Boone had maps, dynamite, and the one thing Crowley couldn't buy: experience. While Boone tended his burns, Cole spread the ancient map beside a survey chart. Lines overlapped perfectly. The old symbols matched geological markers used by modern prospectors. "This treaty's real," Cole said. "Filed before Arizona even had a state court. If we register it with the federal marshal, Crowley's local deeds won't stand." Boone nodded. Then you'd best hurry. He's not the patient sort. Mara studied the parchment quietly. The vow still binds us, she said. Until the land is safe, neither of us can break it. Cole hesitated. Are you saying we're actually married? Her eyes lifted. The stone doesn't care for ceremony. It cares for truth. You spoke yours. Cole felt the weight of that settle somewhere between his ribs. For the first time since the war, a promise meant something. They reached Ashford's Spur just as the town woke. Miners shuffled toward the rail camp. Shopkeepers opened shutters. No one seemed to notice the soot and blood on Cole's shirt. Boone split off toward the telegraph office to contact the federal marshal in Tucson. Cole and Mara walked toward the notary's building, a leaning wooden shack beside the courthouse. Inside, the clerk looked up from his ledger, squinting. Paperwork. Cole laid the parchment on the counter, filing an ancestral treaty under mineral rights. The clerk sniffed. Don't see many of those. He adjusted his spectacles, scanning the text. Union of Keepers, Water and Ore. Never heard of this code. It's older than your office, Cole said. Before the man could reply, the door swung open. A shadow fell across the room. Silas Crowley. He looked immaculate despite the dust outside. Sheriff Pickett followed him in, face pale but defiant. Well, Crowley said pleasantly, seems the dead have risen. I do admire persistence. Cole's hand twitched toward his hip, but Crowley's cane tapped the floor 3 calm beats that sounded like a gavel. No need for violence. I simply came to congratulate you on surviving a tragic mining accident. Accident? Cole growled. Of course. Such a shame. Explosives are unpredictable. My men barely escaped. Mara stepped forward. You set those charges. Crowley's smile didn't reach his eyes. My dear, you'll find accusations dangerous without witnesses. Sighed. It spans Suman. He turned to the clerk. This man's deed is under dispute. As the largest stakeholder in Black Banner Rail, I'll need that document impounded for review. The clerk hesitated, glancing between them. Cole spoke evenly. You don't have the authority. Sheriff Pickett does, Crowley said smoothly. Pickett swallowed. Mr. Hart, by order of Tenvision. Don't, Cole warned. Mara's voice cut through the room, quiet but sharp. Every man who touched blood at Devil's Gulch will face the same judgment. The wind already knows your name, Sheriff. Pickett flinched. For an instant, fear flickered in his eyes before he masked it with anger. You keep that superstition to yourself, lady. It's to get an interman resouth. 4 in 1 2. Crowley laid a hand on his shoulder. Easy. We're all civilized men here. He turned back to Cole. Let's be practical. Give me the treaty, and I'll forget the charges I intend to file: arson, fraud, perhaps even theft of federal property. Think carefully before you answer. Cole stared at him, calm as a man facing the gallows. You're right, Crowley. Words echo in that canyon. You should have listened to yours. He grabbed the parchment, tucked it under his arm, and backed toward the door. Crowley's smile finally cracked. Stop him. Pickett drew his revolver, but before he could fire, Boone burst through the opposite door, waving a telegram. Marshal Hayes from Tucson's on his way. Federal jurisdiction. Crowley's expression soured. You meddling fossil. The sheriff lowered his weapon, uncertain. Federal? Boone nodded, panting. Said he's got questions about a murder near the Gulch. Seems your name came up, Crowley. For the first time, the railroad man's composure faltered. He straightened his coat. Then we'll settle this legally, he said tightly. Enjoy your moment, gentlemen. It'll be brief. He strode out, the sheriff following like a shadow reluctantly tethered. Outside, the morning sun burned bright and merciless. Cole exhaled slowly. That bought us time, but not much. Boone folded the telegram. If Hayes really comes, he'll want evidence. Real, tangible proof. Mara looked toward the horizon where the canyon shimmered in heat haze. Then we return to the gulch, Cole nodded. Before Crowley buries it for good. She met his gaze. The wind's with us. It won't stay quiet forever. They started down the dusty road, 3 figures against the rising light, an old miner, a scarred soldier, and a woman bound by stone. Behind them, the town carried on as if nothing had changed. But in the east, the wind was already turning, gathering strength through the canyons, humming a name no one dared repeat. The gulch was breathing again. Part 3. Blood and Silver. They left Ashford's Spur before sunrise, the desert already breathing heat. Boone led his mule through greasewood. Cole followed with the ledger hidden in his coat, and Mara rode behind, silent eyes on the canyon's distant scar. At the rim, the blast Crowley set had blackened the rock, yet the canyon still breathed. "We don't go the same way twice," Boone warned. They slipped into a narrow crevice where cold air sighed from below. Inside, wind turned to music, low flutes of stone. A chamber opened around them like a bell. On a pedestal, 2 carved rings, within and without, waited. Cole poured a drop of water across the groove. The drop rang like a note. The wall shifted open. Mara looked at him. "The canyon answers only to hands that want it alive." He nodded. "Then let's hear it breathe." The next chamber glittered with veins of silver and a thin shimmer of water. Among the rocks lay an iron chest sealed with black stone. Inside were letters and ledgers, Crowley's ancestor and Sheriff Warren Pickett's names across stolen treaties, proof that water rights of the Tsena had been forged. Boone's jaw hardened. Dane's daddy. Crowley's bloodline. Cole sewed copies into his coat. Boone take the rest to Father Lyle. Sanctuary's safer than the courthouse. The old miner left with the chest. Cole and Mara went deeper, following the hum until a new light sliced through the dark bull's-eye lanterns. Sheriff Dane Pickett stepped out with Judge Malvern Tate, Crowley's hired mouthpiece. Tate grinned. "Fraud, theft, impersonation. You're both under arrest." Mara's calm cut through the echo. "A man cannot hold court inside the throat of a vow." Tate's smile soured. "Lady, rocks don't make laws." They bound her wrists with wire. Cole moved, but 4 guns said otherwise. They marched the captives out as dawn burned the canyon gold. Halfway to town, Cole smelled smoke. The courthouse roof glowed red. "Shame about the records," Tate said. In the square, townsfolk watched as Mara was dragged up the steps. Then a bell rang, not from the courthouse, but the church. Father Lyle stood beside Boone and the opened chest. On a table lay the ledger and seal. "These documents are filed with the church," he called. "Copied and witnessed. The vow is older than your office," the crowd murmured. Tate shouted, "She's a fraud." "And you," Lyle replied, "sell stolen water." A federal whistle split the air. 4 riders entered. Marshal Hayes from Tucson. His badge caught the smoke. "We're here for treaty interference and murder at Devil's Gulch," he said. "Sheriff Pickett, your weapon." Dane hesitated, then handed it over. Hayes faced Mara. "You have proof of this vow?" She nodded. The deputy clipped the wire from her wrists. It fell like broken chains. Boone pointed east. "Crowley's men hauling oil to the canyon, planning a bonfire." Hayes swung into the saddle. "Then we ride." They reached the ridge as flames licked from barrels above the gulch. Cole led them through the side vent. In the bell chamber he set his hand on. Without, Mara. On within. Stone recognized them and opened. Smoke roared down the main throat. "They're trying to burn the names," Mara said. "Then we make the canyon speak louder," Cole answered. He pulled the primary peg. The bell's tone rolled up through the earth, gathering every smaller note into a single word that struck air like thunder. Outside, the smoke reversed. bursting back over the ridge. Men cursed, horses reared, wagons caught fire. Inside, the canyon spoke again, clearer now. Older, final. A name echoed through the dust. Silas Crowley. It didn't sound like accusation. It sounded like judgment. Marshal Hayes heard. Boone crossed himself. Outside, the sheriff lowered his badge into Hayes's hand without a word. Far on the ridge, a black-coated rider appeared, silver cane catching light, motionless against the burning sky. The canyon inhaled, preparing to speak his name once more. Part 4. Law of Iron, Vow of Stone. The wind that carried Silas Crowley's name still lingered in the canyon, like smoke that refused to rise. No one spoke for a long moment, not the marshal, not the deputies, not even Sheriff Dane Pickett, who stood hatless, his badge lying heavy in Marshal Hayes's hand. When the echo finally died, the canyon exhaled a low, satisfied sigh. "Marshal," Boone rasped, wiping sweat and dust from his brow, "if the wind can speak that man's name, I say it's high time the law did the same." Hayes holstered his revolver. "It will. Today." He turned to Cole. "You said Crowley's Ridge house overlooks this canyon?" Cole nodded. "About a mile east. He built it where he could see everything he owns and everything he stole." Hayes looked to his men. "Mount up. We're paying the good gentleman a visit." 1. The ride to Crowley's Ridge. The afternoon sky burned the color of copper. Ashford's spur faded behind them, the church bell tolling slow and heavy. Ahead, the ridge rose from the desert, like the back of a sleeping serpent, black rock, scarred by the gleam of Crowley's rail line. They rode in silence. Only the jangle of tack and the low hum of wind against the canyons filled the space between words. Boone broke it first. "Crowley's too clever to wait at home with the curtains drawn. He'll have men. A lot of 'em." Hayes nodded. "Then we'll bring truth instead of fire. That scares his kind more." Cole looked toward the horizon, where the sun turned the ridge to a blade. "Truth's about to walk up his front steps." Mara, riding beside him, spoke softly. "He built his house on the very stone my people called the Sleeping Mouth. When it wakes, it swallows the loudest voice first." Boone grinned. "Then maybe we should knock loud." 2. The House of Smoke. They reached the mansion near dusk. It wasn't a house, it was a monument. Polished wood, glass windows hauled across 3 states, iron balconies that looked down on the bones of the desert. And yet, for all its finery, the air around it smelled wrong, too still, too rehearsed. 2 armed guards waited at the gate. Hayes dismounted first, coat brushing the dust. "Marshal Hayes, Tucson District," he said calmly, showing his badge. "We're here on federal business regarding murder, fraud, and treaty violation." The taller guard shifted his rifle. "Mr. Crowley's not receiving visitors. Then he'll be receiving warrants," Hayes said. A voice floated from the veranda before anyone moved. Smooth, educated, poisoned honey. "Marshal Hayes," Silas Crowley called, stepping into view. "You travel fast. I was just drafting a letter to your office. Sing Stun Roof. Sings way. On the Wyan." He looked immaculate, black coat pressed, silver cane gleaming. Only the faintest ash smudge on his cuff betrayed that he'd been anywhere near smoke. "You've caused quite a stir," he continued. "Setting my sheriff against me, interrupting my operations, inciting local superstition. Surely you don't intend to trespass on private property." Hayes met his gaze. "This ridge sits atop stolen treaty land. That makes it federal business." Crowley's smile stayed, but his hand tightened on the cane. "Stolen? No, Marshal. Acquired. Signed. Sealed. Forged." Cole cut in, his voice flat. He stepped forward, holding up the leather-bound letter Boone had rescued. "Your grandfather's hand. Warren Pickett's seal." A bargain written in English lies and translated into blood. Crowley's smile froze. Mr. Hart, I had a feeling you'd crawl back out of whatever hole you fell into. You bring your witch too? Mara's cloak fluttered in the rising wind. Your family murdered the Tsena and buried the proof beneath their bones. The canyon has remembered for 30 years. Crowley chuckled softly. And I suppose it told you that itself? Cole took another step. It told all of us. The bell spoke your name. For the first time, Crowley's composure cracked. The corner of his mouth twitched. Fairy tales, he muttered. Maybe, Hayes said, but fairy tales don't carry ledgers with signatures. He nodded to Boone, who set the chest on the veranda steps. Inside, the ledger and letters gleamed in the lantern light. Every contract, every forged seal, every piece of blood paper that ties your family to the Gulch murders. Crowley looked from the chest to the marshal's steady eyes, then smiled again too quickly. So, you mean to arrest me? Hayes nodded. Alive, if possible. Crowley turned toward his guards. Then I suppose it's not. 3. Fire again. The first shot shattered a lantern. The second cut through air where Boone's head had been. The night exploded. Hayes dropped behind a column, firing back sharp and measured. Cole pulled Mara down behind the stone trough and returned fire 3 clean shots, each finding wood, iron, or flesh. The echo rolled down the ridge like thunder. Crowley moved with surprising speed, retreating toward the back stairs. You fools have no idea what you're interfering with, he shouted. This house stands on history, Boone yelled back. So did the people you buried under it. Another volley cracked the air. One guard fell. The other stumbled, dropped his gun, and fled into the dark. The ridge went quiet, except for the heavy sound of breathing and a slow drip from the shattered lantern oil. Marshal, Cole called. He's heading toward the east wing. Hayes reloaded. Go. We'll flank. 4. The vault below. Cole and Mara slipped through the shattered doorway, boots crunching glass. The hall smelled of whiskey and smoke. A portrait of Crowley's father loomed above the staircase, half lit by the flicker of fire from the study beyond. He'll have a vault, Mara whispered. He always hides what he fears most underground. They followed the sound of footsteps down a corridor lined with iron doors. At the end, an office, walls of books, and a heavy steel hatch sunk into the floor. Crowley knelt beside it, hands trembling as he fit a key into the lock. Don't, Cole said quietly. Crowley froze. The silver cane in his right hand tapped once, twice, and with the third tap, he swung it like a saber. The hidden blade inside caught lantern light, missed Cole's throat by an inch, and buried itself in a beam. Cole's fist answered faster than words. The blow sent Crowley sprawling against his own desk. The key skittered away across the floor. Mara retrieved it, holding it up. This what you killed families for? Crowley glared up at her, blood running from his lip. You think you can undo history with a key? No, she said softly. Only open it. She turned the lock. The hatch groaned open, releasing a gust of cool, ancient air. Below, stairs descended into a chamber carved from the same stone as the canyon. Lantern light spilled down to reveal rows of shelves, crates, jars, and ledgers stacked like tombstones. Cole descended first. What he saw made his breath catch. Bones, hundreds of them, arranged in careful circles around a central altar of black rock. On it sat a small silver bell, dull with age. Mara's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. The last voices of my people, she whispered. He kept them beneath his house. Crowley followed, panting, one hand on the wall. Artifacts, history, they'd have been lost without me. Cole turned to him, jaw tight. You don't preserve the dead by stealing their silence. The bell began to hum. The sound rose through the stone low, steady, mournful. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Mara stepped forward, hands trembling. "They're waking," she said. "The canyon remembers where it ends." Crowley backed toward the stairs. "You don't know what you're doing." Cole caught his arm. "No, but the canyon does." He struck the bell with his palm. The note it gave wasn't sound, it was a wave. It rolled up through the ridge, through the floor, through the pillars above. Outside, Hayes and Boone saw the veranda tremble. Glass shattered. The ridge groaned like thunder trapped in rock. The silver veins beneath their boots pulsed once, bright as lightning, then went dark. When the noise faded, the house leaned sideways, coughing dust. Hayes shouted, "Hart! Miss Stone!" A figure staggered through the doorway, first Mara, clutching the small bell. Then Cole, soot-streaked. Crowley limped between them, blood at his temple but breathing. "The vault's done," Cole said. "But he's alive." Hayes stepped forward, cuffs in hand. "That's enough." 5. The verdict of Stone. By dawn, the ridge was quiet again. The sun rose red through smoke, catching the metallic glint of wagons overturned and lawmen weary. Crowley sat bound to his own veranda chair, his house cracked behind him, his empire in ash. The small silver bell rested on the table before him. Hayes stood over him. "Silas Crowley, you're under arrest for murder, fraud, theft, and desecration of treaty property." Crowley laughed weakly. "You think any court will convict me? Half this territory owes me silver." Hayes looked past him at the horizon, where the canyon lay still as an oath. "Then we'll let the land testify." He nodded to Mara. She lifted the bell and struck it once. The note drifted outward, soft, low, spreading. It reached the canyon, and the canyon answered. A second tone rolled back, deeper, older, undeniable. The wind gathered and carried both together across the ridge, down to Ashford's spur, and farther still. People in town looked up, hats in hand, unsure if they were hearing thunder or something closer to prayer. Cole watched Crowley's face pale as the sound surrounded them. "The canyon speaks only truth," Mara said quietly. "And now it knows yours." Crowley's head bowed. For the first time, his voice broke. "What will you do with me?" "Let the law handle you," Hayes said. "But the rest belongs to the wind." 6. The oath renewed. When it was over, they rode back to the Gulch. The air smelled clean again, touched with rain that hadn't yet fallen. Boone led a wagon carrying the seized chests and records. The deputies followed with Crowley, silent and pale. At the rim, Mara knelt by the stone altar, where their vow had begun. She placed the silver bell upon it, and whispered in her native tongue. The wind answered in a single cool breath. Cole stood beside her, hat in hand. "What did you tell it?" "That justice can rest," she said, "and that we will keep the vow." He looked down at the canyon's depths. "We?" She met his eyes. "Two keepers, one within, one without. You can't break a vow once the stone remembers it." He smiled a little. "Guess that makes this marriage official." Boone snorted behind them. "Hell of a honeymoon." It muddy-botted. Marshal Hayes rode up, reins loose, weary but satisfied. The rails suspended. "The federal office will seize Crowley's property till the courts decide. Folks in town are already talking about a new well. You two may have started something." Cole looked to the canyon, where sunlight struck the silver vein like a scar turned to light. "Not us," he said. "The land just finally spoke loud enough to be heard." Mara rose, brushing dust from her hands. "Then we keep it that way." Together, they stood at the edge as the sun climbed higher. The canyon breathed slow, steady, alive, and for the first time in 30 years, the wind over Devil's Gulch carried no names, only peace. Part 5. Judgment at the Breathing Vein. Morning rose over Ashford's spur like a held breath. Silas Crowley sat bound outside the church, his empire in ruins, his silver cane gone. Around him, townsfolk gathered, some to see justice, some to see what justice even looked like. Marshal Hayes read aloud from a paper blackened by travel. Silas Crowley, charged with murder, fraud, and desecration of treaty lands. The Black Banner Company is seized until trial in Tucson. He folded the warrant and looked to Cole Hart and Mara Stone. Before we ride, speak your truth, so it's heard by more than paper. Cole stepped forward, hat off, eyes steady. He told it all: the vow at the altar stone, the breathing vein, the hidden vault beneath Crowley's mansion, the names carved in rock. When he finished, silence hung heavier than applause. Then Mara spoke. She told the crowd what her people had called the vow of two keepers, one within, one without. That the land itself bound water and ore together until both were shared in peace. She lifted the silver bell, its dull surface bright in the Sunday. The canyon remembers, she said. Now the living must. Boone added the plain man's testimony: barrels of stolen water, the courthouse fire, Crowley's men fleeing when the wind spoke their names. By the end, no one doubted. Hayes turned to the crowd. Any man wish to speak against this? None did. Only the wind answered, slow and honest. Mara looked to Hayes. Before he's taken, the canyon asks one thing. The names must return to the place of names. Hayes nodded. Then we take him there. The return to the canyon. It wasn't planned. But the town followed the marshal's men, the wagons, Cole, Mara, Boone, even the people who'd once worked Crowley's rail. At the altar stone, Mara placed the bell, where their vow began. The wind came cool from the depths below. Hayes ordered Crowley brought forward. He stood pale under the desert sun. The man who once owned everything, now smaller than the sound of his own breath. Mara struck the bell once. The note rolled down through the canyons, deep and low. The stone beneath them shivered as the place of names answered. For the first time, the living heard the dead. Hayes raised his voice. By the law of this land and the law older than it, this place stands sacred. Any man who harms it answers to both. Crowley stared at the bell. You think a sound will change the courts? It already changed the world under your feet, Cole said. The well called Sunday. Later, they dug a well near the altar, nothing grand. Just hands and shovels, dust and sweat. When the shovel hit a pocket of cool air, water rose like a slow breath. Clear, steady, clean. Father Lyle lowered a bucket, lifted it, and smiled. For the living. They ringed the well with stone. On it, Mara carved the old Sena mark, beside a single H, for heart. Two keepers, joined in witness. Hayes made Crowley drink first. The man hesitated, then did. No one cheered, but something in the square softened. When they left, Hayes said quietly to Cole, "You've got the rarest kind of victory, son, the kind that doesn't need a gunshot." Cole looked to Mara. Only a vow. Epilogue. Weeks later, the well still ran. The town called it Sunday, because on still mornings, the bell's echo drifted over it like a hymn. Boone built a bench facing the canyon. Father Lyle kept the ledger in the church, its pages safe from fire. Dane Pickett worked without a badge, guarding the well at night. And Cole and Mara, two keepers of a vow older than law, walked the canyon at dusk, listening to the wind that finally carried no names, only peace. The breathing vein had spoken, and this time, the living had listened. When dusk fell, the canyon kept its silence like a secret finally told. The well at its rim shimmered with the day's last light, and the rope above it swayed slow, patient, as if remembering every hand that ever drew hope from its water. Crowley's house was gone now, and with it, the echo of greed that had haunted the ridge. What remained was the steady breath of the land, the whisper of a promise kept. Two keepers, one within, one without. Their vow carried in every drop that rose from stone to sky. By morning, the town would wake to the sound of buckets and children's laughter. Water would move from hand to hand, and stories would trade places with silence. Some would forget how the canyon once spoke. Others would listen closely enough to hear it breathing still. And if someday you ride this way and find a silver bell resting by a well called Sunday, know that the vow held true, that justice, once spoken, doesn't fade. It just waits for the wind to say it again. If this tale found you, stay with us on the trail. Subscribe, turn on the bell, and share the story so the wind keeps its voice and the well never runs dry.